Let's say you're an MGA and you're doing well and you're starting to think you want to hold the risk. Um, what's the pull towards full stack, and how often would that be the right instinct?
Hmm. So it's a very, as the English say, very different kettle of fish. I don't really know why we say that because I don't think fish should be in a kettle. But anyway, um, so the question is partly where do the economics lie, right? And this is actually interesting because as some of the listeners will know, Hippo is a earlier in its life was an MGA, and it also owns a carrier that provides capital for MGAs, both in terms of fronting, so where basically they're providing the paper, but then most of the risk goes off to other players in the market, but also retains material amounts of the risk for different programs, right? And so if you have your own balance sheet, you do, I guess you control, you're kind of vertically integrated, right? In a sense, you control more of the economics for good or ill. And like, that you've got capacity, right? Because if you're an MGA and you're working with a carrier and they just go, oh, we don't have enough capital, or we don't want to do this type of business anymore, that can be a problem. However, it is much more complicated to run an insurance company than to run an MGA, because MGA is about getting the business, and yes, okay, it's about underwriting expertise. In some cases, it's about claims. In other cases, not. That may be done by third parties or by the carrier. If you're talking about being a full stack insurer, there's a lot more regulation. There's a lot more to worry about. Reserving, investment management. If you're doing, longer tail business, you need risk management people. You need complicated. You probably need internal audit. All this kind of stuff. So, and then you end up at. Well, first of all, you could end up back in the position where you were with a bigger company. But the problem is, if you're an MGA and you just decide you want to be a carrier, you have a big disadvantage because you're a carrier that's just focused on one line of business. And that's very difficult because you're not diversified. So one year, maybe the results are great, but the next year they could be absolutely terrible. And we've seen this a bit with small companies, for example, who just write property insurance in Florida. If it's a really bad year for natural catastrophes, their results are appalling and they're really, really under capital strain. If they get lucky another year, maybe it's really good, but that's not necessarily sustainable. Big insurance companies, and even more, reinsurance companies, right, are very diversified. And so, maybe one line of business is not doing so well, but others are compensating. So in my opinion, to set up a carrier to only do one line of business is like highly risky, and I'm not sure I see the point of it.
So let's stay on that point. You had mentioned about an undiversified carrier's economics. Um, so let's talk about what happens when they need somebody else's balance sheet. Who actually captures the margin?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a few ways of doing this, right? So they would increase their reinsurance buying if they can, but of course, the reinsurer in this case is calling the shots, right? If they not having good results and they know they're desperate, so the answer in that case is the reinsurer. Another thing that I've seen happening sometimes is that companies in other parts of the ecosystem, if I can put it like that, will sometimes invest in the capital of these companies, but they're getting other business from them. So, for example, some brokers do this, but then they are getting, they're placing business into this carrier, and they also could be placing the reinsurance business out. So they are getting some of the economics back as well as the return they hope to get on the capital. It's also, I mean, it depends how it works out, right? It's not necessarily crazy because just because you have one bad year doesn't mean that you have another bad year, but it also doesn't mean that that won't happen. So we all know that, you can have two 1 in 100 year events straight after each other. So you are right that in this example, however you solve it, you're going to be giving away the economics to somebody else because you're desperate and they're not, right?